Hello everyone, Raven Knight here. Thank you for coming to the video. Before I begin, I'd like to remind everyone that I do have a second channel live right now for all of my writing advice, stories, and story reviews. It's called Raven's Writing Room, and a link will be in the description. It would mean a great deal to me if y'all went to go subscribe and check it out. Like I said, link is in the description. Alright, now on to the video in question. I released a video not too long ago about the poor direction of the For Honor lore of late. I've had lots of people express their similar feelings and agreement with me on that point, and I even got a shout out from the legendary Havoc himself, and I can't thank him or any of you enough for the words of encouragement and uplifting praise. Seriously, thank you guys a bunch. However, after making the video, I've been thinking for quite some time on the matter. The lore of For Honor has been suffering for some time now. The current lore of the game seems to have become very dry and repetitive, as I said in my previous video, and I want it to stop. I want to fix the issue. But in order to fix the disease, we must first diagnose the problem so we can discover a solution. So, what is the problem? I fear that the lore writers have started adhering to a very juvenile writing formula. The reason the writers have allowed Horkos to become so powerful in the last few seasons is because they need Heathmore to be run by the de facto villain so that, whenever Heathmore does something evil or morally questionable, you know it can be easily blamed on the edgy Horkos bad guys. Now, granted, while Bolthorn himself was not a member of Horkos, every other major atrocity so far can be connected to Horkos. When the pirates showed up, Bowen joined forces with Horkos due to their connections with Astria. The Aphira showed up as a result of Horkos destroying their homeland. The Inquisition was formed by Astria and Ravier, and now the City of Gold has been looted and plundered by conquistadors under Astria's leadership. Every evil and sin thus far can be tied back to Horkos. The problem is this writing is not only repetitive, it's childish. A story of objective moral bad guys hurting poor innocents, and then those innocents either rising up or needing a hero to rise up in their place to fight the objective moral bad guy. Aphira, Yenchen, Magi, and now the Aztecs. And Chimera themselves have been almost forgotten about, because we can't have a good faction in For Honor to counter Horkos. Now why can't we? Because then it just wouldn't make sense for Horkos to stick around, would it? The Aphira, Jaguars, and Yenchen would all obviously join forces with Chimera, the good guys, and overwhelm Horkos. So Chimera has to be weakened or forgotten about, completely pushed aside. We need our bad guys to be in power so that our victimized populace and foreigners will be the underdogs who rise up and take the fight to the evil ones. Now, is there anything wrong with writing your stories and lore like this? Not necessarily, until you realize something about For Honor that sets it apart from many other fighting games: its connection to history. For Honor, at its core, drew us in with its historical warriors, cultures, and aesthetic. We wanted to see historical knights, samurai, and Vikings fight each other with their real-world armor and weapons. It's what brought us to the game to begin with, at least most of us. That history is the foundation for these heroes' existence. And the first thing we ask in this battle royale scenario is usually, how did they end up here? Why are they fighting? Where is this taking place? When is it taking place? Who caused it? How? Why? Where? When? Who? These are the questions that are the building blocks for all lore. The tools to building a world and its lore comes from these points. The Cataclysm was of course the cause, and from there we see a ceaseless war for domination between the three factions. But all the while, the three unique and diverse cultures and histories of these factions play a role in their gear, armor, weapons, and motivations. You cannot divorce who these heroes are from who these heroes were and where they come from. And for that reason, history must play a factor into the actions, behaviors, and motivations of these warriors. And history is anything but childish. Now, there are two kinds of derogatory responses to this line of thinking that I've heard. The first is, "What are you talking about, Raven? The lore is already taking from history. It's all a nod to the Western imperialist war machine. The invasion of Arabia is just like the Crusades. The conquistadors stealing gold is just like the genocide of the Aztecs. The Inquisition season is just like what the Spanish Inquisition did in Europe. And the theft of the scarab bracelet is like what the West does to African culture. Isn't that reflecting history?" And the answer to that is yes, but no. For Honor is looking through a very specific lens of history. The popular lens. The friendly lens. The easy lens. God, wouldn't it be so easy if all of history could be simplified down to one group of very bad people did very bad things, and then very good people rose up and stopped those bad people? That sounds like something Assassin's Creed pushes a lot of, and I have issues with that too, but more of that later. As the famous phrase goes, though, quote, "There are always two sides to every story, and in most cases, even more than that," end quote. What, never heard that phrase? Well, it's mine. That's why you haven't heard it. Put that on a t-shirt, baby. Trademark it. Well, joking aside, there's a truth to the phrase. Nothing is ever so cut and dry as one side is evil and the other is good. It's a contradiction of truth. There's a reason that in the season Shattered Fates, we learned very little about Arabia and the city the Ephyra came from. We didn't learn much of their culture. We didn't learn much of their motivations, history, or traditions. We only learned that they were peaceful, that they were vastly intelligent and scholarly, that they were run by a very wise sultana. Just all around, really upstanding, good people. Such delicious sheep for the big bad wolf, right? Such an easy connection, right? Because weren't the Crusades the evil bad guys who came in and beat up the poor innocent Arabians? But students of the Crusades would tell you this isn't how the real Islamic Empire was during the days of the Crusades. It was far different. There was atrocity on both sides of the conflict before and after the conflict. Evil performed on both sides. But you see, For Honor can't reveal that truth. It would lessen the sense of sympathy we may have for the Ephyra and their culture. But what For Honor fails to realize is that by writing the Ephyra this way, in a very sympathetic light where they're the good, peaceful innocents, they create narrative problems in their lore. For example, if the Arabians in the Ephyra are super peaceful and do not engage regularly in war, how did the Ephyra so easily defeat the Black Priors and Ravier upon arriving in Heathmore, considering they are battle-tested, trained, and grew up in a war zone? If they were so skilled that they could defeat the Black Priors in combat, then why did they fail to do so in Arabia? It said in the lore that they suspected Ravier and the Black Priors of something, but didn't act until after they betrayed them. If their city is in peril and the Sultana is dead, why did they come to Heathmore for revenge without working to rebuild or reestablish their sultanate? Are they not scholars trained and bred to be warrior scholars? Wouldn't it be more important that they save their people and their lands before seeking petty revenge? See, the lore writers have to bring about a bunch of answers to these questions, and it all came about because they decided to create a childish good and evil story out of a conflict that probably deserved far more mature and nuanced writing. Let's try a few hypotheticals here. What if, instead, what if the Arabian Empire sought to expand their reach into Heathmore and it turned into a war to hold off the highly skilled and educated Muslim warriors? Or, what if the Sultana saw a vision of Arabia's destruction and launched a preeminent strike to stop this future from happening, and this attack is what sparked resentment in Ravier to retaliate? That's a thought. Or what if the Arabian lands had a trade agreement with Egypt, and with Neferka gone to Heathmore to get back the Scarab bracelet, they decided to invade and take Egypt for themselves, and this led Neferka begging for Chimera's aid in fighting them off because he didn't trust Horkos. But in the process of Chimera and Neferka coming to reclaim Egypt, this led Horkos to launch their own assault on Arabia since the Sultana wasn't there at the time, and the Ephyra were away in Egypt. That's a thought. Or, here's another one. What if Chimera, on the run from Horkos because of how weak they are now, fled to Arabia to seek shelter from Horkos? But the problem is, you keep a huge army in Arabia long enough, they start to eat at the, start to eat at the resources. In the process, the Arabians decide to subjugate them and treat them as dhimmis or slaves, and thus Horkos, ironically, needs to show up and save them. Do you see now how we can create unique, enriching, and diverse stories where there are good and evil deeds and characters on all sides of the story? The stories of the mustache-twirling bad guy exploiting the poor innocent victims is a story that has grown old for us players and just doesn't meet historical reality half the time. Now that does lead to the second very disparaging comment I get, which goes like this. Dude, no one cares about history in this game. For Honor is a game of superhuman warriors wearing the aesthetic of historical warriors, and they fight using fantasy powers and superhuman strength. Just keep history out of it. You'll be a lot happier. The problem with this line of thinking is that it's a cop-out. It essentially flees from the overall problem. If we are to divorce history from the lore of For Honor, then what on earth would we say adding a new historical hero? How could we justify borrowing Egyptian, Arabian, or Aztec warriors? We have no justification for adding them if history doesn't matter. Why would you care that the Vikings wear poor armor, or that the Raider is shirtless? Surely if history matters not, then the way the Vikings appear matters not. In fact, let's hand plate mail armor out to all the factions. Let's give them all AK-47s, remove the horses and replace them with motorbikes, or hover bikes rather, and then release a tide of velociraptors, while we're removing all common sense. But, alright, let's not talk history. Let's talk what is, and we can start with the campaign. Removing historical context, the campaign of For Honor was not childish. Despite what many have told me, that it was a lackluster story, boring, and that Apollyon was a stereotype, the story had nuance to it. For example, take the Warden, who had seen how the Vikings had mistreated and stolen from his people at the beginning of the campaign. He then went on a crusade to attack and destroy a Viking grain storage building. He felt morally conflicted about it. But why? He was justified, wasn't he? The knights were the victims. The Vikings had raided them first and attacked them first and had done so every year. This was righteous, getting back at them. This was just. Why did he think that he was wrong in this? Why did he think what he did was wrong? Why did he think attacking their grain storage was a bad thing? Surely he was justified, right? Maybe it's because storytelling and characters and cultures have a degree of nuance to them. They have diversity of thought, position, and outlooks on justice, motivations, and wants. This is why history itself is so nuanced and diverse, because everyone sees things differently. Apollyon recognized the power of diversity and difference of thought. She used this knowledge to turn Heathmore against itself. She used it to spark endless war by pitting their senses of honor, victimization, and justice against each other. The righteous fervor of the knights, the savage ferocity of the Vikings, and the stoic and honor-bound way of the samurai, directing them all in a way that they all felt vindicated, all felt right, all felt like what they did and what they needed to do was necessary. None were the villains and none were the heroes. All fought and all died thinking that what they were doing was just and necessary. And that often is the case in historical war. In this coming season, we've already seen that the conquistadors have stolen mountains of gold, and this is somehow leading to a curse on them all. At least that's kind of the indication I've gotten. And they've also captured an Aztec prisoner and are abusing him. Some would argue that this is historically sound, but it is not. Some would argue it doesn't matter if it is historically sound, but it does. Because we are once again seeing the Magi season and the Aphira season on display. Mustache-twirling, evil, abusing, and mistreating innocents. Harmless victims being mistreated who will rise up mid-season to reveal that they are powerful and justified in their response, but it needn't be this way. What if it was not Horkos that found the City of Gold, but Chimera? They're desperate. They need finances to fight Horkos. They are so desperate to build up their finances, they make a gamble and seek the city. It would make far more sense for them to take this gamble than Horkos. They find it and beg the Aztecs for help, and they agree on one condition, but they won't name what that condition is. Chimera, who are still desperate, decide to agree, and when offered the gold, Chimera bolsters their ranks and coffers. But in exchange, the Aztecs start taking citizens from Chimera territories for human sacrifices. Chimera is mortified but can't get them to stop, so they, in more desperation, go to Horkos to ask for help to stop the Aztecs, and the Aztecs rise up in response. Or, here's another one. What if the Aztecs are discovered by Heathmore and allowed passage to Heathmore to broker trade? The Aztecs get a foothold, but Heathmore tries to exploit them for their gold, while the Aztecs seek victims for sacrifice. And thus, Horkos and Chimera both have to question, are we really willing to sell out our own citizens for the money? Leading to an interesting question of morality. Or the idea I propose, that the Aztecs start kidnapping, Griffin goes searching, and is captured. The Inquisition looks into the matter, and they discover the City of Gold, and a rescue operation is put in place. There is so much that can be done. There is the opportunity to explore the good and evil of all sides, to gain a better appreciation and understanding through historical truths, not revisionism. The solution to For Honor's lore problem is to abandon this childish sense of evil versus good, black versus white, oppressor versus victim. Instead, use what history has already given you: nuance, depth, diversity, culture. These are the things that can bring you new ideas, new conflicts, and new wars. Apollyon did not win because she was a victim or because she was a villain. She won because she understood what the developers had forgotten, it seems. That these warriors fight for their sense of honor, justice, and duty. And if you can find the good and bad and what that stands for to these heroes, you can use it to build an excellent set of stories. I'm sorry, For Honor. The good versus evil, mustache-twirling bad guy setup was fine when you did Horkos versus Chimera. Now, I think we're ready for something a bit different. And maybe I'm the only one who feels that way, who knows. But that is my 10 cents for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys once again. Again, I'd like to remind you guys that the link to my new channel is in the description. I really appreciate you guys going to check that out. Thank you guys, and I will see you in my next video. Take care.